Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. Welcome to Encrypted Connections, a special Sunday edition. Is it Sunday? It's Sunday. I hope you guys had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I'm so happy and excited to be here right now for this show. We tried once before, or maybe twice, I don't remember. And then there were some bad storms and it didn't happen. And then the holidays came and I said, I cannot give up on this. This has to happen. I need these ladies on the show. And here they are, the Sisters of the Moon, Barbara and Debbie. How are you guys tonight?
Good.
So happy to have you.
Yeah.
So happy to have you here. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, it's our privilege. Yes. Thanks for asking us.
I was telling Barbara, and I think I told Debbie before when we chatted in Messenger that I was a fan of Bigfoot Odyssey from the very beginning. I mean, literally from the first Odyssey documentary they made, I was watching. And Carrie's was my favorite. Sentimental value, plus it just kind of spoke to me personally because of what I went through. But after Carrie's, it was yours. I had to have watched it 10 times. The amount of the experiences and the stories that you tell about those experiences just were like, I was on the edge of my seat every time I watched. And even though I heard it before, I just wanted to hear it again because I wished I was in that position at least a little bit. And then there was some of it where I'm like, I don't know how they even do this and deal with some of this stuff, but just amazing. So since this is your first time on, I'd like to focus more on not the recent stuff because we can have you back on to talk about that another time. I'd like to go back to the beginning. Can you tell us how you guys got your start doing this? What drew you into this field?
Well, I've been interested for a long time. And in 2005, I moved into a house that I started having activity around, but I didn't have any knowledge of Bigfoot, just that I thought they were out there. Well, about 2012, I started having things happen and I started interacting and I started looking for people that I could get involved with. And I found a group in 2016 when I met Miss Debbie Lou. And they were having an expedition and there were lots of women there. And I met Debbie and our little group got formed and we started going out and we just had all kinds of fantastic things happen to us. And we still go and it still goes on.
And
we just all clicked right away.
Yeah.
I mean, we had known each other forever.
Yeah, and it seemed that way when you watched the Odyssey. You could tell that there was such a great relationship between you all. Like, I mean, the Sisters of the Moon kind of fits perfectly, right?
It does for us.
Yeah.
It does.
So I don't know where to start because I have both of you on, so I don't really know where to go with this. Can you tell me, Barbara, since we talked a little bit about some of the stuff that was going on at your house and your property, can you talk a little bit about some of that?
Well, I can. When I moved there in 2005, my neighbor came over and we were talking and he was telling me how they were welcoming me to the neighborhood and that it was a nice place to live. Nobody bothered you. I mean, everything was safe. And I spouted off and said, well, the only thing that would scare me would be to open my door and see a Bigfoot. And he said, well, you could. And so right away, he put this in my head that, and then just little odd things started happening around the house. And we had gates that we could not keep them closed and locked. We put chains around them. But that wasn't good enough. We started having to padlock them because no matter how we chained them. And these are big, heavy metal gates that went out into our pasture. We had almost 30 acres. And it was full of cedar everywhere. And I had a pond out there. And the first footprint I think I found was the winter of 2006. I had gone out to the barn to feed my horses, and at the time I didn't let them come in the barn, so it was just rocky and dirty. And I found the most perfect little footprint you'd ever want to see. Just looked like a little baby had stepped down in there. But the thing about it was, there's no children at my house. My grown son was there, but his foot wasn't 5 inches long. He couldn't make it. So just little odd things like that. And I would get things brought to me just that would show up. I had particularly a horseshoe that showed up, and I put it over my back door, and it sat there for a long time, and then one day it just disappeared. It was gone, and then it was gone. I couldn't tell you how long it was gone, but I was walking in my pasture. I used to walk a lot in my pasture and just be out there. This horseshoe was laying right in my path, waiting for me to pick it up and take it back home. So I did. I picked it up and took it back home. Well, I worked a lot back in those days, so it was in the back of my mind that Bigfoot was out there. But it was amazing me that, oh my, he's coming in my yard. They're coming up in my yard. So I got some advice from another group of people, and I started doing little things on my own. I started playing stick games. I started out putting the sticks out in my pasture. I would put them all in a row, pointing the same way. Well, then the next morning, I would find the same amount of sticks in my front yard, pointed like mine. I'd go out in the pasture and turn mine another way. The next morning, I'd go in my front yard, and those sticks are pointed the same way, my sticks. Whatever way I turn my sticks, the ones in the front yard would get turned that way too. Well, then I don't know, it got crazy. Started bringing me headless rabbits. Yeah. And there's one time that I didn't talk about this for a long time because I didn't want people to think I was crazy. But I had taken a piece of copy paper and I had drawn a stick girl, a stick me. At the time I had long pigtails, so I made a stick woman with long pigtails, and I made a stick puppy dog and a stick kitty cat and a stick bunny rabbit. That was my pets. On the back side of the same sheet of copy paper, I draw a big giant stick Bigfoot with hair sticking out everywhere and big feet, big hands. I take this stick out into my pasture near where the pond is, and I put it on the side of a bush, and I take a stick and drive it into the ground. Leave it there. I go out there the next morning to see what's been going on, and this paper has been taken up and put on the other side of the bush with the Bigfoot side pointing up and the stick back through it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. See, this is where I just say I'm so jealous because to be able to walk out your back door for somebody in this field and have such cool interactions with these things. I know there's probably at least a little bit of trepidation at first where it's like, these are giant hairy monsters in my backyard.
Exactly. I tell you what, at dark time, my blinds were down. I could not go outside. I said, you can have it. And it worked out that way. They'd come up there and play, and I'd stay in the house.
Oh, that's amazing.
I've heard them howl outside my bedroom window. My husband and I, not knowing what it was, we heard gibberish outside our window one night. We thought it was the TV running, and he got up to go see if the TV was still on. He said, TV's not playing, but we can still hear just talking.
So
We didn't know what it was. It didn't.
That's so neat.
Leg.
What's that?
The deer leg.
Oh, yeah. Before I got the headless rabbits, one day this deer leg was thrown up on top of my house. I thought, man, that's weird. And And
Yeah, a little weird.
I left it up there for a long, long time because everybody come to my house. I said, "You throw that on my house," and nobody had. So it had been thrown up there. And actually, it was like the forearm off a deer. Nothing meaty, but a little bit of meat on there. Like they throwed it up there for a present to feed me or something. I don't know. I still got that bone somewhere. It's packed up.
Well, Miss Debbie, I know you kept a souvenir or two. You showed me a picture of something that you kept that you put in, you used to decorate your house with.
Yeah, it's over there in my hutch, at the place we call the killing field.
Oh, this place, this is so neat. You got to talk about this.
Well, we had gone out. This was actually going to be the Sisters of the Moon first legit, outing as a group together. And it's a long ways down a long, bumpy, rocky road. It takes you a long time to go get down there because it's such a bad road. But there were three of us at the time in one truck, and we were going to try to find a place to camp for that weekend. And we had pulled into this one area, and it's just kind of off the road, and we turned around, and we're gonna try to back out and turn around and then go and pull back out. And as Carrie, who was in our group at the start, as she had turned and was backing up, and I was looking out the back window. I was in the back seat of her. She had a 4-door truck. As I was looking out the back, I said, "Hold on." I said, "There's a bunch of bones back here." And I said, it looks like deer. I can see a rib cage or something. So we stopped and we got out just to make sure it was, deer and not a human rib cage. And then we noticed away from it was some more. And then further on back, we could see some more. And so we started following basically it was almost like a trail of bones. And we saw that it went back. There was a huge mound back there too of dirt. And so we went right back around behind that. A tree was down because it had looked like there had been a little pathway where you could, walk or even drive in. And that tree was down over that pathway. And so we went back around behind it and went on back. And that area just opened up to a huge, several acres. And it's almost like I guess you could call it a cove or something. The river comes up around a peninsula. That's what I'm thinking of, a peninsula. It comes up around on both sides of it, but it's a pretty big area. There's probably about between 3 and 5 acres, I would say, on this peninsula, solid trees and everything. And as we walked back behind that mound and everywhere where it opened up, we started seeing just tons of bones and rib cages and, deer heads, which it was all, no skin really left on them or anything. A lot of the heads had their antlers still left on them. We've got so many pictures of this area, but we were just shocked. I mean, because poachers are not going to leave those antlers that were on some of those deer, because there was some sets, and there were so many back there, and they weren't all solid bodies. They had been pulled apart, and the legs had been broken. And that's what I have in my hutch over there, is one of the broken legs. Basically, it's a piece this big, and on the inside of it, now I don't know what kind of animal gnawed on it, but there's some teeth marks in there. They look to be square. And but yeah, it's pretty cool. It was a really neat area, and we had lots of activity that weekend in our camp. We had hung some big chimes. I mean, those pipes on those chimes were, gosh, probably 2 feet long. They belonged to Patty, who was with us. And the first night, it was I want to mention too, it was 13 degrees outside, I believe.
Oh man,
cold. It was really cold. And we had a fire out in front, and on the other side of the fire was a tree, big tree, and we were surrounded by trees, and we had hung glow necklaces way out to where the light of the fire didn't hit that area. So it was dark, but we wanted to be able to see if something was moving out there. So we hung glow necklaces all out there. That way, if something walked in front of them, we would see, you know, that it was blacked out or whatever. And we had hung 14 glow necklaces out there. And the chimes were hanging on the tree closest to the fire, real close to it. And there was a huge pile of wood that was coming off the left side of it. And there was a pallet, you know, like a wooden pallet that you stack things on, leaned up underneath the chimes, leaned up against the tree. And the first night, Patty, she was in a mummy sleeping bag. The only thing you could see was her face. Move or anything, and we were within arm's reach, but she couldn't get her arms out of the mummy bag. But she was hearing something right at my corner of the tent. I was just across from her, and she could hear this heavy breathing, and she said it was just scary, really deep. And she said we had a cooler right out in front of the tent, and she said that she could just envision something standing there wanting to get in that cooler and breathing, but she had never heard anything that deep and guttural, as she called it, you know, just this deep breathing. And so she couldn't wake me up, and I was, you know, sound asleep, and she couldn't get her hands out. I could just picture a little dinosaur, you know, trying to raptors, but she couldn't get her hands out. So the next day, when she was telling us about all this, we thought, okay, we need to rig us something up. And of course, she kept her hands out of the sleeping bag the second night, just in case.
Bet.
But the other girl, Carrie, it was her truck that we were in, she had pulled her truck back behind at an angle between our two tents. And Carrie's tent and mine and Patty's tent were set kind of at an L shape, if that makes sense. And so we ran a line. It was just a piece of almost like jute, real fine jute, between our tent and Carrie's tent. And that way we could pull on it if we heard something again the second night. And then, like I said, she had put her truck at an angle back between our two tents. And so the fire out in front on the second night was reflecting off of her big old metal bumper and the wheels and everything that had the silver metal back behind our tent, and it was creating light of sorts, you know, behind our tents. And so we could see stuff back there, and we were seeing movement. We thought at first, well, you know, the fire's dancing around, you know how fires move. Sure. But then we could see shadows passing between the truck area and our tent. And so I had started pulling on the jute to try to make sure Carrie was awake, but the jute had gotten hung up on something outside, and that wasn't working good. But while we were hearing all of this movement out in our camp the second night, I decided, I thought I was going to be brave, and this was our first time as a group, you know, so I was not used to a lot of this kind of activity. Sure. And so I had to really talk myself like, okay, Debbie, you can do this. I mean, I was scared to death, you know. I was like, oh no, what you see out there? And I remembered that I had set up on the side of my cot. And then I thought, I can't like move too much. So I just shifted around, and thank goodness it was a little tent, but I had left the flaps at the top of the door unzipped so I could, you know, down if I wanted to. So as I'm trying to stand up to peep out those little cracks that I had left, I was praying, please don't let my knees pop. Please don't let my knees pop. Because I thought if you got the sound, then they're going to hear it out there, whatever's out there. And I was like, you can do it, Debbie. You can do it. Just, you got it in you. You can look out there. And I did. But what made me really look out is we had started hearing those chimes. And it wasn't your typical ding-a-ling-a-ling like you hear when the wind's blowing and they just start doing like this. we had heard what sounded like something had hit those chimes. And I mean, it was just this loud bump, bump, like when they were going back, like something was stopping it. And we couldn't figure it out, what was causing that. So that's what really, I guess, triggered it in me. Like, I've got to see what's causing this sound that we're hearing from these chimes. And that's why I was looking out. And when I looked out there, it was the weirdest thing, Kyle, because I couldn't explain it. And you know how chimes, when they're hanging down from a tree, I don't know if you can see, there's, just say they're straight down, like my hand is straight down. And you know, you've got that big ball hanging in the center of them.
Yeah.
Now, these chimes were really big chimes, and we had them high up on the tree. And so when I looked out, what I saw was that straight up, almost like something had hit them, and with a lot of force. So they went straight up. But instead of like when chimes are swinging, you know, they're doing like this, and those little chimes are all moving around, and that ball's moving around in the center. Well, these chimes were perfectly, just like if they were hanging down this way. It was almost like something had hold of all of them, where they weren't coming out of their natural shape of hanging, and were going straight up, where they were parallel with the ground. And that ball was still in the center of them. And then it would go back down, and instead of swinging backwards, you know, going back and forth like this, it was stopping. And every time it would stop, you could hear it like it was hitting something. But what I was seeing was nothing back there. I couldn't see anything. Like I thought maybe there was a hand or something stopping it, but there was nothing. And Patty was, you know, like doing little mouth movements, like, what is that and stuff. And I was trying to tell her that it was just going, you know, like this. And I was like, I can't see anything back there. And I still, to this day, don't know how that was happening. I can't explain it. But seeing that happen, and what we didn't know at the time is Henry, who was another member of our group, she had pulled up sometime during the middle of the night and was in her vehicle, and she had put the parabolic dish up on top of her vehicle. And so she was there. We just didn't know it. And she has it. It was all recorded. And so we were very thankful for that. But you can hear it. It just goes bump, 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 just over and over and over. And so that next day when we got up, the first thing we did was run out there to those chimes, and we start hitting them, trying to recreate that same sound. And we couldn't do it. I mean, we tried so many different things trying to get what we were hearing. We tried to recreate what I was seeing. We just couldn't do it. And that, at that moment, that seeing that, that's when I started thinking, okay, there's something more to whatever this is that's doing this. Mm-hmm. And so we came back like, gosh, I don't remember now. I want to say we waited like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, we came back, and I
went this time. I didn't make the first trip.
Yeah, Barbara was able to come that time, and then we came back like a week or so later, or two. I can't remember. Gosh, that's been 5 years now.
Wow.
6 years, yeah. But anyway, it's been a while. But we went back like 2 weeks, and then we waited again, came back. Well, we still had all that firewood that had been out there. And we had when we went out there that next day after the next day after the chimes, we went to get the glow necklaces. Well, there had been 14 originally, but there were only 9 up there now. And we looked all over for those other 5, could not find them anywhere. And we thought, I mean, I'm tall. Barbara and I'm a little bit taller than Barbara. But so I was the tallest one in the group, and I was standing up on this little stool, hanging them up, trying to get them up high. and I would hang them on little bitty limbs. So if a raccoon or something, would crawl out on it, that limb would break, or the glow necklaces would fall on the ground or something. Well, we couldn't find those 5 glow necklaces anywhere. So when Barbara came, I think you came like on our 3rd trip, didn't you, Barbara?
No, I came 2 weeks later when we came back.
Okay. And so we had been talking about, we don't know where these glow necklaces are and everything. And Barbara and I were sitting out by the fire on this trip, and I had said something, we were about to run out of firewood. And so we were like, well, let's just get the wood off of that pallet that's leaning up there against the tree. And so when the pallet was moved away from the tree to start pulling the wood off of it, 5 glow necklaces rode out from under that pallet.
Yes.
And that pallet had been leaned up against the tree, hanging directly under those chimes.
Get the heck out of here.
Yeah.
And just wild. I mean, crazy stuff. And then we had also, we were camped over down away from the area that we call the killing field, where we had found all these bones. And so we had asked somebody that we know on our 3rd trip out there, I believe it was 3rd or 4th. Gosh, I can't even keep up with it now. To come out and look at the area.
Years ago.
Yeah, it was long to come out and look at the area, because
excuse me.
each time we went back, it was like some of the bones were gone. And not that they were deteriorating or anything. I mean, they couldn't have deteriorated that fast, because like I said, it was 2 weeks and then another 2 weeks, stuff like that. So by our 3rd and 4th trips, we were like, this is really weird. And we had found these along the ridge line. We noticed that there were these big holes, and they were shaped. They were long enough for me to lay down in them. And I did. I laid down in them. So that's how I know they were. But they were bigger than me, or longer than me. And so they were, I was 5'9" at the time. I began shrinking. I'm 5'8" now. 5'9", and I had plenty of room on each end. And then there were tons of leaves. But what we noticed was that they were all along the top of the ridge line, and down at the bottom, because it was up on a hill, and down at the bottom was that river that came up along inside that little inlet, basically. And we speculated, wondered if possibly maybe that was something that they had created, and they would lay in wait and run a deer up that ridge line and then just reach up and grab a leg and break it, snap it in two. We don't know. This is all pure speculation, of course.
Sure, yeah.
But on down from there, Henry had at one point called us over there. That's our friend that was there that night, that with the parabolic that first night. Anyway, she had found these 2 trees that were out closer towards the road, and that one was a cedar tree, and I don't know what the other one was, but the cedar tree, of course, still had green leaves and stuff, or whatever the things. Needles, yeah. And they had been bent and pulled over and crisscrossed like that, and it made like a dome shape. And she was like, I'm not saying that that's what this is, but it looks like it could have been used for a blind or something. And so we thought, well, we'll hang. This will be a good place to put a recorder. So I zip tied a recorder to one of those blinds. And at one point, I remember before that happened, when we were walking around, we were talking about how there were, the bones are disappearing. And we kept saying, how are the bones disappearing this fast? Where are the bones? And this is really, this whole killing field area really made me rethink my beliefs on the matter because of all the stuff that happened. But at one point when we were doing that, we had already been out there to that blind area, what we're calling the blind. And we had gone back to the back where all the bones usually were. And when we came back out after talking about how all, so many of the bones were gone, I walked over to that blind area and I hollered at the girls. I said, y'all come here. And we had taken pictures, and now there were bones laying underneath that, to the side of that blind, that were not there earlier before we had gone back there to the back part and then come back out. Now there's bones. And so that kind of blew us away. And so anyway, when the person that we had asked to come out there and look at everything, after they had left, it was him and his son or nephew, I can't remember now. After they had left, that's when we zip tied the recorder to it. And then we went back the next day to get the recorder. And what was really weird is those two trees where they were crossed, each tree now had two breaks on them. The parts of the tree that was crisscrossed, each one had two breaks on them. And they weren't broke completely through. They had just been snapped because they weren't big, huge trees, they were smaller. But both of them now had been snapped, had 4 breaks on them.
Yeah.
And we had been talking about, how they're bent over and how they're not broken. We think maybe they were manipulated because there weren't any and stuff. And we were like, okay, something maybe heard us talking about, look, how they're not broken. And now all of a sudden, the next day, they're broken. And so when we listen to the recorder, you can hear us talking about, we had put that up there, and then we had walked down to where the vehicles were, and we're standing down there talking. We tell the two guys, bye, thank you for coming out. You can hear us. They drive off. We drive off. And as we're getting out of a good, little ways away, you can just barely hear our vehicles now. You can hear 2 tree knocks just as plain as day. And so,
Crazy.
I mean, it's a fascinating area.
Yeah.
This is like the holy grail apparently down there. So let me ask you real quick, because you mentioned that after seeing some of this stuff, your beliefs about this changed. What did you believe prior to this? What did you think about this whole thing prior to seeing all this stuff down there?
Well, I was pretty adamant that they were flesh and blood. And I mean, pretty damn adamant. And then when I looked out that tent that night that those chimes were being hit, and I could not see anything hitting them, the way those pipes on those chimes were, the tubes or whatever you want to call them, they were just like if they had been hanging down steel. It's like something had hold of them with a force of, I don't know, they weren't squished together. They looked just like if they had been hanging perfectly still, parallel to that tree, but now they were that way.
As if something was manipulating the gravity almost.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was, just like that. They'd go straight out. And then instead of swinging back, they'd stop. And you could hear almost like there was some force back there that it was hitting, but there was nothing there. And I can't explain it.
Unbelievable.
And so, yeah, that kind of did a number on me for a while. I was like, I can't explain it.
Oh, I can understand why.
So many other things happen since then that we can't explain. So I don't know what they are. I don't even know that was a Bigfoot doing it. But I mean, we found prints, around our area out there, and I'm still just baffled, really.
It's funny. A lot of people say, and I agree, the more that you get into this and you figure out, the more questions you end up with afterwards, right? So you get an answer to one thing you think, but that answer makes you question so many other things. I I was the same way. I believe that these things, like, I thought people were crazy. Like, what are you talking about? They can teleport into other dimensions. Like, what do you think this is? This is some sort of sci-fi movie. But I just, there's so many different people who are very credible. People that I look up to in a lot of ways. And even the few things that I've seen that were just weird. They just couldn't explain like how or why they were happening. There's just leaves so much to be desired. I want to understand, but I don't know that I ever will. And I kind of have to live with that at this point.
We get amazed every time we go out.
I'm sure you do.
When we think we might have something figured out, it just boom, something entirely different happens.
I'm sure. And we talked about this a little bit before. I asked Miss Barbara, and I'll ask you, Miss Debbie, do you believe that you guys get more activity because you're female?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, and we've camped, by ourselves, just two of us, just two girls, or, sometimes three, sometimes 4 and 5. We don't always get activity, but we've also camped with the guys, and the kind of activity that we've had, coming into this Bigfoot world, this Bigfoot community, I should say, I remember I was one of those keyboard warriors when I first got into the Bigfoot community. I would be like, oh, that's BS. I didn't know jack nothing about anything. But I was like, there's no way that's true. Bigfoot don't do that. Bigfoot can't do that. They're just this big old creature of some sort. But the more we've experienced, especially me personally, as a person who was a keyboard warrior, now when I read stuff, I don't put, oh, that's BS. They can't do that. That wouldn't happen, because I've experienced so much stuff that I'm like, who the heck knows? It could be true.
Right.
It's just, it blows you away.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, the more we learn, the less we know.
Yep.
The more we experience, the more questions we have. And it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Going out.
We're addicted to it.
Yeah, that happens with so many people. I think like once somebody has any kind of experience, whether they hear their first howl and they know that it's not a coyote, they know that it's not a wolf, they know that it's not an owl. You sit back and you're going, man, what was that? That's nothing you know about. And you just kind of go over and over in your head, and it makes you want to go back out there so much because you just want to hear it again, or you want to see that glimpse of that shadow darting between the trees again. It's really just an amazing subject. And I think it's so cool that this subject is so different from so many others in the way that science has given regular people like you and me the opportunity to be such a huge part of the discovery of these things because they didn't believe. And that, so people like us can go out in the woods and be keyboard warriors and armchair researchers, people try to say, but if you were to try to do that in any other scientific subject per se, you wouldn't be able to. But in this subject, we can, and we can play such a huge role. Anybody can. Doesn't matter what your part is. Science isn't keeping anybody from this, and that's the cool part. I just think it makes it so much more fun,
Yeah, it truly is fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always loved things that give you a rush. And this is the biggest rush. I mean, it's better than any roller coaster.
Oh
I,
yeah.
I just can't imagine anything. It's an adrenaline rush for sure. And we have been very, very lucky. And if I didn't know us, especially when I was a keyboard warrior, I'd be saying, oh, there's no way those girls are experiencing so much that they've done, or that they've had. But
We never dreamed all this stuff would happen to us.
Yeah, but here's the thing too, right? So you have so many other people to corroborate what you've seen too, and that helps, right? I
yeah.
think I always say this, right? When people try to argue about like, oh, there's no way that they've had this happen, or there's no way that there's Bigfoots out there or Sasquatch out there or anything other than regular flesh and blood animals, blah blah blah. I always say that Occam's razor has to slice our way at some point. What is it easier to believe that the thousands and thousands of people who've seen these creatures are all crazy, or that these creatures exist? And
Right.
I think it's probably much more likely that all these thousands of people throughout the hundreds, maybe thousands of years, I don't know how long ago the first sighting was, but at least the last couple hundred years, doctors, lawyers, engineers, nurses, garbage men, it doesn't matter, but all regular, good, upstanding people in their communities, it makes more sense to me that they're telling the truth. Just does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think fascinating is the best word for it, because it just draws you in, man. It's like, it's hard to ever get enough. And I sometimes have to pull myself back, because I like, I get watching documentaries and I'm like, well, we'll just watch one more. It's Sunday. Who cares? Right. And I'm 5 documentaries into the day and haven't done a thing.
Well, we're real lucky because Barbara's out there at Caddo Lake now, and
Yeah.
that's huge history of
Yeah.
Bigfoot activity. And we've had stuff happen out there at Caddo Lake. And so we're able to say, hey, you want to go out tonight? So while she's out there, at least we can meet up, and I love having her close to me. She's only like 5 minutes away now.
Oh, nice. Have you gone out since you've been there? Have you guys gone out together since you've been there?
We just ride down and sit by the lake.
Anything happen?
Yeah.
Oh, we hear some stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Couple howls.
We were out there one time. It was, about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and Debbie let out a call, and in just a few minutes, she got answered back. It sounded like it was mimicking her.
It was really close.
Yeah, it wasn't far at all.
And I was not expecting any kind of response because, like she said, it was mid-afternoon.
Yeah, we were just fooling around. And
So
then
nice.
just at dark, I heard the screams right across the river.
Yeah.
They got my attention.
That's so neat.
That when she says across the river's, it's the
Yeah,
outside
it's just right here. Maybe
and
300 feet, maybe 300 yards.
and on the other side of it is a reserve that Don Henley of the Eagles used to own.
Sure.
I don't know if it does or not, but it's this huge, it's almost like an island, but that whole area is basically a swamp. And in certain areas, if you were brave enough, you could walk through it. There's huge alligators and alligator gar and everything else in there. But but it's really, if you're human, you really don't want to walk through the water. So that reserve is only accessible by boat. And so we've years ago, I was out there quite often, and we'd go out to eat with friends at this little, it's like a bar and grill type place that's out there.
Yeah.
And it's a really cool little area. But anyway, we'd come back, it'd be close to midnight or whatever. And the reserve was just right across the river there. And so we'd do a call, and sometimes we'd get a call back. But then it got to the point to where, since we were doing that on a regular basis, when we pull in, all the houses out there are raised up really high on stilts because it floods really bad.
Sure.
So we'd go up the stairs and we'd get up to the door, and I wouldn't even do a call, and we'd hear calls, kind of like, "Oh, they're home."
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's a really good area.
So, let me ask you, real quick, because for me, like, my favorite part is hearing about the stories and the experiences and the encounters. That's just the fun stuff, right? And I think for most people it is. So, for each of you, and I don't know who wants to go first, of all the experiences, all the encounters, all the investigations, do you each have one that you would say is your favorite or scariest? Do you have one?
Yeah.
Either one, favorite, scariest, whatever you want.
I have lots of favorites, but my scariest one was outside of Jefferson, Texas, at the Lake of the Pines, which is probably about 45 minutes from me. And it was Bigfoot conference. It was in October. Bigfoot conference was going on in Jefferson, and Sandy and myself and our niece were attending the conference. And Debbie got her weekends all mixed up, so she was on another trip, but she had picked out the spot and said, "Hey, I think y'all need to go down there and set up your tent." So we did. We got there in the, I guess, mid-afternoon. We got our tent set up. It's raining. It's miserable. Then we went to town. I'm sorry, I had a brain fart.
That's all right.
And we came back after the conference, and we're sitting in our tent, and it had like a little short porch, not a screened-in porch, but like a little gazebo kind of thing you could sit under. And we're sitting under there. We'd just gotten the fire started, and I asked my niece, because Debbie had just got around to sending me the gibberish that she had recorded in Oklahoma. And I asked my niece, "Hey, you want to hear Bigfoot talk?" She goes, "Yeah." So I got my phone out, and we're sitting down, and I play it. Well, just as soon as it played one time, I stopped it and immediately played it the second time. Just as soon as it stops, behind us in the woods, we hear these three boom, boom, boom. And then we just start feeling and hearing something coming up behind us in the tent. And we're just kind of sitting there looking at each other like, oh, we don't know what's fixing to happen. Well, the tent had a tree on each side of it, and when these creatures got up there, one of them, they grabbed one on each side and just shook these trees, and just the water just down all over us. Then they cut off and went out in the woods, and they left. What was amazing to us was the gibberish part of this, because we're going, did they understand what that said? Because the night that Debbie recorded it, the gibberish made them leave. And this night, I play it, and it seems to make them leave again. So that's my scariest and one of my most favorites.
I can't even imagine being in a tent and hearing some giant creature approach this thing. You know they're coming, right? You hear the footsteps, you feel them, and then that's just that overwhelming feeling that something's coming anyway that you get, and then to have them shake the trees, or I don't know how you even. I don't know. I think I'd have a heart attack. I honestly think I'd pass out. And then Debbie, you got out of the tent to go see what was going on. Like, man, you guys you're brave. You're brave.
Barbara and Sandy and Stephanie were actually sitting out in front of the tent, directly in front
inside. We were outside.
You were outside?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Front porch things, that come out and went down the side, and they were sitting under that.
And the sad part of that story is I should have had some absolutely great audio, but because it was raining so hard, when I got back from the conference, I went in the tent and turned my recorder off because I didn't want to listen to hours and hours and hours of rain.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
lesson learned.
I didn't realize you were outside. So they came up while you were outside and still did it.
Yeah.
It came up back behind the tent.
Yeah, they were coming up behind us.
I had planned to be there with them.
Yeah.
And like she said, I had gotten my weekends mixed up. And when I had gone out looking for this area, I was not, it was, well, I'm not going to give away the location. But anyway, I ended up having to send them the pin to it. And I was with Larry and Mark and Dan Rickey and Vicky Fulcher, and we were going on another outing that had been planned, and I had just gotten the weekends mixed up. And so that next day after this happened to Barbara and Sandy and Stephanie, she sends me a text, and I'm in the Jeep with Larry and Dan and Vicky, and she's telling me everything that happened. And I'm so excited. So I'm reading the text, and I tell them, I'm like, listen, guys, I just got this from Barbara. Listen what happened last night. So I'm telling them, reading what Barbara had written, and then I'm telling them where we were at, or where, the campsite was at that I had pinned for them. And so when I tell Larry and Dan and Vicky, well, Dan and Vicky have been Bigfooting for 40, 50 years. And they're both they're right around 70 now. So
Wow.
I've been Bigfooting for at least 40 years, but they were outlaws, Bigfoot outlaws forever. And we were on the way to an outlaw outing at this time. And so they're asking, well, where were y'all at? And so I'm telling them, kind of the road made a curve and yada, yada, yada. And Vicky's like, that sounds very similar to this area. So she starts telling these stories about two totally different times that they had been out there and had sightings around that same area. And so I'm talking to her saying, now, where exactly was this? And she's giving me descriptions and I'm giving her descriptions. And so I pull up on the map, on Google Maps, and I'm showing them. And she goes, that's the same exact location. And they at two different times they had been out there and had two sightings.
Wow.
And it was right in a curve. The road makes a curve. She said, that's the same exact location. And I thought that was just amazing. Because I think, didn't I text you, Barbara, and tell you that
Yes.
Dan and Vicky said that?
Yes.
Blew me away.
That's crazy. Texas is obviously, in Louisiana, that whole area down there is known for having tons of activity and kind of teeming with these things. But the reports kind of differ from place to place. Like Florida has the swamp ape, Louisiana kind of has the skunk ape thing too a little bit, and then you have like the Falk monster, and but I hear a lot of dogman stuff coming out of Texas. Have you guys ever had any encounters with any dogman?
Knock on wood, no.
Those things
that I know of.
Yeah, they sound much different than I guess the quote unquote normal Sasquatch. They seem to be a lot more aggressive when people have encounters with them, and I don't know. It's intimidating enough seeing or knowing that there's a 8 foot, 9 foot tall, hair covered, half human or part human primate. Having something out there that's got big pointy ears and a snout and fangs and weird legs, like I'm all good with that. You guys can keep that wherever that's at.
Yeah.
I don't want anything to do with that.
I have fought tooth and nail against believing in dogman because that to me that's just a werewolf.
Yeah.
I mean, might as well just call it a werewolf as far as I'm concerned. But this is another thing that Barbara and Sandy and I just kind of recently realized. For the longest, I've been talking about I don't want Dogman to be real, and it's getting to the point that I'm having to say, okay, there is something like that out there, because a couple of guys that I trust with my life, I believe in them. They're real good friends of mine, and Larry's, and well, all of ours. They've had some stuff happen, and that involves Dogman.
Yeah.
And if they say it's true, then it's true.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned. And Barbara and Sandy and I were sitting in camp one night, or one day actually, sitting there talking, and I'm telling them about some of these experiences, and I just said exactly what I just said to you about how I just don't want it to be real, but I believe it's got to be, because they have had these experiences. And I said, I used to have nightmares growing up about werewolves. And we found out at that time, long story short, because it could be a very long story, especially if I'm telling it. Long story short, we found out that we three all had the same, almost exact dream about werewolves when we were little.
Yeah.
Now, Barbara and Sandy are sisters, but I didn't know them up until a few years back now. But we had the same exact dream about werewolves growing up. We don't want that to come true.
No.
Or I don't care if I ever see a dog man in my life.
No, me either.
But wonder if we've always said we feel like we're connected somehow.
Yeah.
And when I started talking about that nightmare that I had, because it was a reoccurring nightmare over the course of
had it many times.
Yeah, they all had recurring nightmares, those two. And sitting there, we're like, okay, is this why we're connected? But we don't want to be connected in that way.
It's
we all three had the same dream.
That's it's really crazy. I for some reason in this, and I don't mean just Sasquatch. I'm talking about like the fringe topics, right? When you're talking about paranormal, aliens, UFOs, because I think in some way they're all connected, at least a little bit. Because I have people who go out to spots where there are, Sasquatch activity, heavy activity, footprints constantly, rocks being thrown at you, vocals, people seeing them. And in these places, they're seeing orbs. They're getting EVPs, which are the voice phenomena that you don't hear with your ears, but on the recorder, they show up afterwards. So many things that kind of crisscross, they cross over between the different subjects. But what I also have found through different stories from many different people is that there are these synchronicities that happen where people are led to each other or to a certain place or to study this in such crazy ways. I don't know why or how, but I wouldn't be surprised if if this connection that you guys share is something much deeper. And I don't know anything about how or why, but I just the stories that I hear are very weird. They're just very weird.
Yeah. We definitely feel like there's some sort of connection. I mean, because if I didn't know us, like I said, when I was a keyboard warrior, I'd be like, there's no way that they're having all that activity all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have it every time we go out, but I mean, my goodness, we have been doing this for a few years now. We have been very, very lucky to experience the things that we have experienced.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would be skeptical of if it wasn't us experiencing it. I'd be like, there's just no way. I mean, And we've questioned it ourselves. We're like, what in the world? And that's why we started thinking maybe we're connected somehow, maybe there's something. But we never really could figure it out. And we still don't know if that dream is what it is or not. But I mean, because that was all about werewolf.
Yeah.
Like I said, we don't want that to be real. We don't want that to come through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan. That creeps me out. But just like you, like I have just two people that I'm really good friends with that are in this field, and they've said the same thing. Like, listen, I saw one of these things, and one of the guys saw one very, very, very close, and this is somebody that I trust, completely. I would never doubt a thing he says. Not only that, he's been doing this for so long. I mean, there's so many other people out there who probably trust him in the same way. I'm not going to say who it is because we talked about this off the air. I don't know if he shared it with anyone else, but yeah. So it's just scary. I mean, that picture of the beast from Seven Shoots. Have you ever seen that picture? That thing, that doesn't look like a normal Sasquatch to me. It looks like it has a baboon type snout, kind of. Not like a werewolf, but it looks different. Just looks different. So who knows what the heck, if there's subspecies and gene splicing. I don't know how these things were even started. So who knows what happened along the way.
And if you look at us, I mean,
yeah,
we look the same but different.
Yep.
Yeah.
And especially all across the world, we're all humans, but we all look different, and so
makes sense.
Who knows?
Makes sense, especially if the DNA studies are true and they have human DNA in them. Then you're right; their appearance would vary, and even if they didn't. When you think about different animals and different geographical locations, they change, right? Sizes change, color patterns change, all that stuff changes. So, yeah, it makes total sense. I just still don't want to see anything related to the Dogman. They can keep that wherever that's at. Hide it away.
Yeah.
So you didn't tell us your favorite or scariest moment, Miss Debbie.
Well, I think that would probably have to be Tribulation Bay, the place we call Tribulation Bay, where we recorded the gibberish.
Yeah.
And that's also in southeast Oklahoma, not very close to the killing field, which is also southeast Oklahoma. But that was my favorite, I think, all in all, because of all the different times we've been out there. We've been very lucky. Now, we've been out there at times and nothing at all happened, but we've been out there at times and a lot of stuff happened. Like I said, that's where we recorded the gibberish, and that happened the very first time we had ever been out there. And it was me and the other lady I mentioned earlier, Carrie. Mm-hmm. It was just the two of us. And the night that the gibberish was recorded, we had been setting up the tent. It wasn't quite dark, and all sorts of stuff started out in the woods. We were hearing all different kinds of sounds, different animals, but it was all coming from the same exact area. We heard a cow sound. We heard what sounded like a sick chicken. It was a chicken, but just off a little bit. It was crazy. And I remember we'd look out there because it was starting to get dark, but it wasn't quite yet dark, and it was mid-September. And we'd look out there when we'd hear it, and of course it's thick trees, solid trees, and we'd be looking back through there trying to see if we could see anything. It kind of went up a little bit of an incline, and we just kept putting the tent up. We didn't even have recorders out at that time because we got there and started setting the tent up. And the last thing we heard sounded like a bear, kind of. We thought, okay, now there are supposed to be black bear in this area. We've heard tell of it, never seen one. But so then we were creeped out, and we were like, do you have any bear spray? No. Do you? No. It was just the two of us. So we decided, okay, let's just go into town, it's a 40-minute drive into where we had to go to town, and let's get some bear spray. And so that's when we put the recorder out before we left. I put my recorder out, and we left, drove into town. They didn't have any bear spray at this place. We went to Walmart and no bear spray. So we drove back, and we get back. By this time, of course, it's dark. And then just all sorts of stuff breaks loose. We're sitting out by the fire now, and coming from that same exact spot, going kind of up that hill into those woods, we were hearing all kinds of sounds again. Then we started hearing whoops and whoops and calls and just all sorts of stuff. And we had our recorders, sitting there. I think we each had a recorder, but they were right there at our chairs. And so we're texting Henry, who was also supposed to be there that night, but we never knew when she was going to get there. Sometimes she might not even show up. Sometimes she might be there early or come up in the middle of the night when we're already in tent. So we were trying to text her. Well, I didn't have a signal, so my stuff wasn't going through. And I think Carrie had signal, and I remember she was even posting it on our Facebook page that we had that's private to us, saying, all sorts of stuff's going on. Where you at? And anyway, we also heard, instead of just animals that night, we also heard what sounded like a power saw sound. And I mean, it was coming right there from that wood line, it seemed like. And there was no way there was a power saw in there. And we heard what sounded like a motor sound. And all of this was coming from that same exact area. We're sitting there looking up this incline into the woods, and we've been all back through there since then. And there's nothing, I think we drove to see how close the nearest cow was, and it was over 2.5 miles away. And I know that those sounds can carry, but these are in thick trees too.
Yeah.
So that's a big difference. But this all sounded like it was coming from just the wood line right there. But anyway, so this went on for a long time. And then finally we decided we're going to go into the tent. And we get into the tent, and I remember telling Carrie, okay, I'm not walking out there I usually zip tie the recorders to a tree branch or something. I was like, I'm not going out there. And so I just put one on each corner of the tent. My cot was across the front part of the tent, which was facing out to where our vehicles were on out there. And so I put one on my corner, and then I put one down on Carrie's corner of the tent, which that corner was facing the hill, the wood line. And so as soon as we get in there, she's laid down on her cot, and I'm trying to fix my cot, and I hear coming from directly in front of me what sounded like a cough. To me, it was like a 2-syllable cough, like that. And to me, my first instinct was, oh, Henry's here. She's pulled up. She's just, got out. I didn't hear anybody pull up, but I heard this 2-syllable cough. And so I immediately just unzipped that window that's right above my cot, and I'm standing up. So I unzip it, and I look out. Well, there's nothing out there. There's no, Henry's vehicle isn't there. And I remember I zipped it back up, and I stepped back, and I look at Carrie, and I said, Henry's not out there. And she's like, are you sure? And I said, her vehicle's not out there. And about that time, I hear the cough again. And I call it a cough because I don't know that's what it sounded like. Sure. But this time, instead of it being kind of directly out in front, now it sounded like it was more over towards the corner of the tent, in that direction. And so now I unzip it and I pick up my spotlight and I shine it out there and I shout out, Henry. And I call her out, her name out 2 or 3 times. I think I said it twice. And the second time I said both her names, her first and last name. And there's no answer. And I'm shining it out there and I don't see anything. So I zip it back up and I step to the middle of the tent now and I could stand up. It was a real big tent. It was Carrie's tent. And we had a little nightlight hanging from the center. So I'm standing and I'm looking over to my left where she's laying. And I said, that wasn't Henry. Henry's not out there. And I don't see anything. And so I said, did you hear that? Well, she's laying on her side and she goes, no, I couldn't hear it. And she goes, I'm laying on my good ear. And I said, your good ear? I didn't know you had a bad ear. So I'm like, well, sit up. But, this is kind of need to know kind of stuff here. Anyway, so now she does. She leans up, kind of props her head up, on her arm like that. So then we hear it. She actually hears it now a third time, and it's back in this back corner. So it eventually makes its way all the way around the tent. And I think it coughed 5 or 7 times. And so by this time, we've both heard it. We know it's not Henry. Henry's not out there. At one point, she was laying in her cot, and then she had gotten up, and we're in the middle. And at another time, I'm sitting down. I mean, this went on all night long. I'm sitting down in the middle of the tent on the floor, and while I'm sitting there, something hits the front right corner of our tent, and it come in pretty far, but that whole tent side is just shaking. And all this was caught on recorder because that recorder was right there on the corner of that tent on the outside. And so that was pretty awesome. It caught all that. Another time it had gone around and it had actually something had gone on her corner of the tent. So she got up and got in the middle of the tent with me. She's texting, trying to see where the girl, where Henry's at. She's putting stuff on our Facebook page saying all sorts of stuff's happening, and then at another time back over our left shoulder between where we're at and her cot, there was a little closet type area that jutted out the back part of the tent, and it had flaps on the inside of the tent, and it was supposed to be a closet area. Well, we, being girls, we used it as our potty area. And so we had a bucket, inside there. And so at this point, something had made its way back there. It had been dragging either a branch or its fingers or something along the roof line. And so we had started looking up, watching it, and we had turned and was watching it drag on back there. And it was hovering around that potty area, doing whatever it was doing with it. We're both looking in that direction over my left shoulder. And when that happens, something else, that's when they hit that front corner of the tent that first time. Now, the second time they did it, we were sitting and I happened to be looking in that direction, and it had hit down below my cot, and I could see the actual hand. Of course, it was on the outside of the tent and it had pushed the tent in, but you could see all of its fingers, and it had come about that close to hitting the legs on my cot. And that's when we knew that there were 2, because that's when we had been looking over there and then something hit the front and we looked over there and we could see the hand come in. So now we knew there were actually 2 of them out there. So that was a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
And so finally, Carrie, it would die down and then something else would happen. We'd get back in the middle, die down again. She'd get up in her cot. It had gotten to where it had kept slowing more and more down. There was a longer length of time in between the incidents. And so finally, I had gotten back up into my cot and was laying there. And I remember I would look at the time on my cell phone to see what time it was so I could make notes of it to be sure to listen to my recorder at these times. And so I had just looked at my recorder, at my cell phone, and it was a little after 3:00. And while I'm laying there, I look over at Carrie, and she's laying on her left shoulder facing the wall of the tent. And that's the end that was facing that incline going up into the woods. And the last time I looked at my recorder, it was about 3:30-ish. And I would say about 15, 20 minutes after that is when we heard the gibberish. And it had come from that area kind of that went up the hill. And it sounded like 3 different individuals. And it was just short little like blah, 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 blah. And then in between where those 2 individuals were, because they were further away, but in between there, closer in to us, it's a 3rd individual was there. And it was like, sounded like it was getting on to them, basically, to me. And it was like, blah, 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 blah. And when I heard the gibberish and everything, it was all so fast. It was like, blah, 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 blah. And then, it hits you. You're like, holy crap. Of course, that's not the word that went through my head.
Sure, yeah.
And just as that's happening, then you could hear wood, like the snapping and splintering of wood. And then you could hear it cracking. I hit the ground because I'm getting up and I'm going to, in one step between me and where Carrie was, I kind of reach and hit her. And she turns and looks at me, and I do like that, like, are you hearing that? And she nods, yeah. Well, that wood splintering and cracking was a tree that came crashing to the ground. And all of that's on the audio. And that was a holy crap moment. But what we didn't know is Henry had pulled in right before that happened. We didn't know she was out there at this time.
Henry's good at that, huh? Pulling in without anyone knowing.
She came in at all hours of the night if she showed up. But so after that happened, nothing else happened that night. And so we eventually go to sleep. And then that next morning, I hear movement outside. I was asleep, and I open my eyes and I see that it's daylight. Because my first thought while I'm asleep and I'm hearing this movement, I'm thinking, oh no, is it starting again? And then I open my eyes and it's daylight. So I look out the window and I see it's Henry out there. And so I go hauling out there and I'm like, where the heck have you been? You don't know what you missed. And she said, hold up, before you tell me anything at all, let me tell you what I saw when I pulled in. And so when she pulled in, she went a little bit past like where our tent area was, and she kind of curved in. And so her headlights hit our tent. And she said that from the left-hand side to her left, which is my corner of the tent, she saw the calf part of a leg, like it was up and running. You know how when you're running, your calves are coming up. She said, I could see this part of a leg, and she reached down and she touched her calf. And she said it went along that ridge line, and it's like it was that ridge line circled back around behind our tent and went right back up into that hill where we were hearing all of this stuff. And I'm like, we had been having stuff, messing with our tent all night once we went inside. And so I'm telling her, yada, yada, yada. And I finally get to the part where I'm like, the gibberish and then the tree crashed. And she goes, I heard the tree crash. She said, I had just pulled in and come to a stop. And just within no time is when that tree crashed. And so now, the more we thought about it, this is just speculation on our part. Our thoughts is those 2, maybe juveniles, who knows, had been messing with us all night long. Since before, just as it was starting to get dark is when we started hearing all these different animal sounds and stuff and all that. But the whole time we were going to Walmart, which ended up being about an hour and a half at the least, that recorder that I had set out before we left, dead silent. Dead silent. Nothing on that recorder while we were gone for an hour and a half. But as soon as we got back is when it started up again. So we think it was probably juveniles. And then here Henry is coming down the road between 3:30 and 4 o'clock in the morning. And we think maybe a big guy, parent, who knows, is seeing this vehicle coming down the road and comes over and says, y'all leave them women alone and get your butts back home. Somebody's coming. And I mean, that's what y'all leave these women alone and get your butts back home. And I mean, that just makes sense to us. Whether it's what happened or not, we don't know. And then push that tree down like, okay, it's it. It's over.
It makes sense. If you hear the Sierra sounds, you can hear inflection in the voices where in certain spots I don't know for sure, but if I had to make an educated guess, in certain spots I'd say that thing's asking a question. Like hey, have you ever seen one of these? Like it sounds like that, like it's asking a question. And so I get what you're saying. Like if you say it sounded like it was giving them hell for messing around. They have a language. It's been proven. It's so that makes total sense.
And then Barbara and Sandy and I, it was almost a year. Right at a year later, the three of us went back. We'd been several times in between, but this particular time, Sandy had come in from Georgia, and she had never been out there to Tribulation Bay. And so we went out there, and it was, oh my gosh, it was freezing cold, and the wind was blowing crazy. We had put tarps up trying to block the wind. Oh, it was bad cold. Mm-hmm. And so I had put my tent up on one side, and Barbara and Sandy had set theirs up closer up towards where that hill and tree area and everything was. And the later it got, we started hearing stuff. And while we were sitting there, it was sprinkling and stuff. We were sitting in the middle of the two tents, had a fire going, and Sandy and I both heard, coming from that same location again, what sounded like a motor sound. And I just looked at her, and now we had been out there several times over the course of that year, from the night that it all started, and we had not heard a motor sound at all in this whole year since the first original night. And then here's this motor sound again, and I look at Sandy, and Sandy looks at me, and we can both tell that we're hearing it. And Barbara was over to my left, further away, and she didn't hear it. And I said, "Are you hearing that?" And Sandy said, "Yeah." And I said, "This is the first time in a year since this happened that I've heard that." And so I started getting a little creeped out again. And so I decided I'm not going to sleep in my tent. And so I just got my sleep stuff, and I put it in their tent. And I put my stuff right on the floor next to Sandy's cot, which was on the right-hand side. And if you're looking at it, and then Barbara's cot was on the left-hand side. And her tent at the time was a dome shape. And coming off each end of that dome was it just jutted out and then came back in at an angle. And that's where the cots were at. And then in the front part of the dome, it had an arch that had a canopy that came out a little ways, but that arch came back in and swooped down towards the door. And so we had a heater inside the tent because it was so cold. But we also had all sorts of twinkle lights out behind the tent, which would be up along the wood line and, in the woods and stuff. Because there's trees. We were in the middle of trees, but it gets thicker on up that hill. And it had been raining during the day, so we had a chair that had gotten wet, and we had turned it upside down on the right-hand side of the tent, which is where Sandy's cot was, and I was right up next to her cot. And Sandy had flipped over and was laying on her side facing her wall. Barbara was completely under her covers. We couldn't even tell there was anybody in her bed because she was completely covered up. I'm laying on my back on a mat on the floor, and I see this tall figure, and you can see the shadow because of those twinkle lights, come down the side of the tent and I'm watching it, and then I look at Sandy, and she looks over at me. She turns over and looks, and we know that, okay, she did see that. She saw that too. We both flip over onto our stomachs, because now what just walked past our tent, it hit that chair that was upside down. It hit it as it's walking by. It's now in front of our tent where that canopy dome comes down and it juts out. It sounded like it was reaching around trying to pull this big old tub that Barbara had all of her cooking stuff in. She had been getting in and out of it all day, getting stuff out of that tub. Whatever this was that we just saw walk upright on two legs, because we could see it very well because of those lights, was now bent down trying to pull that tub. And it's heavy. And so as it pulled it, its hand evidently would slip, and you could hear it, how the lid will pop, or, it makes that noise.
Yeah.
So now we're flipped over on our stomachs trying to see through our tent wall, which is, you can't do it. And it just kept with it, kept on and kept on and kept on. I'm looking over at Barbara. Sandy's looking at Barbara. Barbara's still under her covers. And this thing is messing with this tub, and it's popping that lid so many times. And finally, I go over to Barbara and I just hit her. And she just nods like, yes, I'm awake. I'm hearing it. She doesn't see anything. So while I'm on her side, the door, it's a dome shape. Well, the top corners of that door area has mesh, and you can see out. But so I'm trying to look out that mesh now. But because of that canopy, the way it kind of jutted out and came out of the slope, whatever it was on the back side of it, and I couldn't see anything. I couldn't see a hand reaching around it or anything. And I kept going back and forth from each side trying to see it. Couldn't see anything. So I just sit back down on my little cushion thing that I'm laying on, and we're just sitting there listening. And finally, this went on how long, Barbara?
Oh, my Lord, a long time. 15, 20, 30 minutes.
And then she finally hollers at it. You go ahead and imitate what you did.
Get the hell out of here. And it did.
It did.
For a little while.
For a little while. But then several minutes, I don't know how long later,
it wasn't long.
Whatever it was started, or another one for all we know, I don't know. Her truck was parked on out further away, and she had a bunch of wood in the back, and she had a tarp thrown over it because of the rain. And you could hear it messing around her truck, even trying to open the handles on the door, because you pull the handle and it's locked and it just slams back. You could hear that, and you could hear it messing with the tarp and stuff. And so that was almost exactly a year later that all that had happened.
That's so crazy.
That's the very first time we ever used twinkle lights in the woods, and it paid off.
And we use them all the time now.
Yeah, we haven't stopped using them.
That's crazy, man. It's still it's so nuts to me that they come right up to the tent. Like, I had a guy I was talking to not too long ago, and he said to me, he was like, he's been doing this for a long time, 30 years or something like that. And he said, I tell people all the time, if you really want to see one, if you really want to get activity, he said, don't go out in the woods knocking on trees and whooping and yelling. He goes, set up a camp and just hang out.
Yeah.
He said, they will come to you. They'll come to you. He said, I don't know what it is. If it's just their curiosity, they feel safer. Yeah. They're nosy. Yeah. Yep.
They watch us. I think they're fascinated with us the same way we're fascinated with them.
Yeah.
The thing is, they probably get bored of humans because, we're always out there all the time. They can see us any old time. We don't hide.
Right. Yeah. So we're like their TV.
Yeah.
They're like their TV. It's pretty crazy, though. It's just amazing to hear that you guys have had such incredible activity over and over again. And it's like uh, I wish that I could go with you to see this, but then who knows if you get it, because the man would mess it all up, right? I really do believe that there's something to that, like whether it's because women are more sensitive and open emotionally and that nurturing and that kind of stuff. Like, I wonder if they can really just sense that.
Well, I think also that they get extra curious with us because even though we're hearing stuff happening and getting rocks thrown at us, we don't get scared.
Yeah.
We don't react.
We might be a little frightened, but we don't let our fear come out, because I think that would be dangerous for us.
Yeah.
We talk to too, like in Georgia, we've had rocks thrown at us a lot. I mean, a lot. And they've hit Barbara's car, big rocks sometimes. And we'll talk back to them, we'll say, hey, don't be doing that. That's not good. Don't be, we're friends. And we just talk to them. We let them know that we're friendly. And I don't know if they can understand us or not, but we try.
I think the intention is what's important, though. If you have the right intention, I think that's important.
And we dance and laugh and play loud music and have fun. Do whatever we can to draw their attention. I mean, we'll go hiking in the woods, sometimes, and walking around, but we're doing it to see what's out there, to get an idea of the lay of the land, to know our surroundings. So we're familiar with, if we hear something from a certain area, we know what that area is like. Sure. But we do it also mainly to make our presence known. And we found some cool stuff in the woods when we, camped and had activity and stuff. We found asterisks and 2 big trees that were completely uprooted, and you can tell that they were moved to this location. There was
I have these pictures. These pictures. I'm going to try to pull them up because I want people to see these. And then, Barbara, I have yours. I don't want to keep you guys too long, so maybe you can explain what these pictures are, and then we'll try to get you out of here soon because it's already been an hour and a half, and I know you ladies have better things to do than hang out on YouTube all night. Let me try to do this because this is all. I'm still not really great at doing this part. All right, share. Let's see. Okay. So this is one. Can you see that?
Yeah, that's up in North Georgia. That was after it had been moved.
And then that's the before.
It's before. And the thing with that, the 2 sticks that are on the right-hand side of the picture, in the after part, those 2 sticks, they completely been moved. They're not in the picture of this one that you're showing now, and they've been replaced with 2 other sticks. And
oh wow.
And so that was pretty interesting. But that's in our North Georgia location where we just got back from here a month or so ago.
Yeah.
Wow, okay, yeah. So they're 2 totally different sticks. You're right. Huh, that's crazy. All right, let me see if I can pull up the other ones now too.
And we've seen them walk by our tent there. Patty was with us here, and she saw the shadow. She could even see a tuft of hair sticking up on its head. She could see its arm swinging, and that its hand was down lower past its knees. And it walked right in front of our tent, between our tents and the campfire, and went over to the table where we normally had food, but we put all that in the vehicle. We don't leave the food out usually. But she saw.
Sorry, I'm trying to give me a hard time now again. I'm so bad at this. All right, here we go.
Better than I would be.
I'm so bad. All right, here's the trees. This is crazy. This is
Yeah.
this is crazy.
Now this is just a couple of miles, 2.5 miles. I'm not real sure. It's in close proximity to our Tribulation Bay area, and you can
They're
see,
gigantic.
Yeah,
yeah,
they
they're
were huge.
and Mark Newble and Larry Porch came out and they actually saw this. This was, gosh, I can't remember the year now. Let's see,
17.
2017. So it was a year, I think. It happened the end of 2017, but I think they came out there the first part of 2018 or something, didn't they, Barbara?
I don't remember.
But anyway, so they had come out there. I think it might have been late 2017.
I think it was too, because you hadn't met Larry when you got the gibberish. You met him
Right. I
what, a
met
couple
them
weeks later.
Uh-huh. And so they were with us, and we had found these two trees stuck up in a tree, and those roots are just jammed down into the ground, and you can see there's no holes where the root ball would have been or anything. Those roots were hard as could be, and those were very long trees. And so they were moved there. There's no drag marks, nothing, but no holes at all where those trees were.
I was
And
going to
then
say they look like very hard wood trees.
Yeah. And when we went back another time at a later date, some of the trees that were out there in that same area, right around those two big trees, had been broken over, and they were all broken in the same direction.
So crazy.
And
There's
then
no way. There's no way
You
any
have-
humans moving those trees. I'm sorry. It's just not happening. There's no way that they're
I
so
don't-
long.
you can't really tell from this picture, but they're both stuck up into the same area, and they're so long that they bend and swoop up.
Let me
Mm-hmm.
see if I have another picture. I think I do. There you go.
Yeah.
That's
can see
nuts.
They're very big,
They're
and they're not
huge.
little trees.
They're huge. They're so long. There's no way. Yeah, that's just not. This is like people try to argue these things, and there's just no possible way any human did this, especially if there's no drag marks.
No.
Yeah, drag marks at all.
Yeah,
And like I said, you could stand right next to the base of the tree, and there's no hole. It was solid ground. So there's no hole that had ever been there, or it would have, dipped in some. They were
nothing.
moved.
Yeah, just flat.
All right, let's see what else we got.
Yeah.
And that's a strict that, of course, a given there. But all kind of in the same proximity. That asterisk, you cannot, where it's at, you cannot see it from where the trees were, but it's still in this huge area of woods.
Yeah.
And now that, I don't know. I think Bigfoot can make them. Who knows? But
yeah, I mean,
still,
they show up in areas where these things or activity is constantly, right? And I've seen some that are so big that it makes no sense again that any human could do it or would do it. How? Giant trees, like it's just weird that these things. This is the stuff that I see more around, like here, is I see stick structures a lot. Yeah. And I don't put a ton of weight into some of it, but the ones that I can't explain at all, that when you have a tree that's 30 feet, 40 feet long, it's 15 inches around, it probably weighs in the neighborhood of 500 pounds or 400 pounds, and it's balancing up in another tree 20 feet off the ground or 30 feet off the ground. How do you explain that? And the root ball and everything, it's balancing perfectly. the tree's not falling like that. It's just not happening. It's not happening. So how else does it happen? I mean, a raccoon ain't doing that.
And what got us into this area is Henry and I had been out at Tribulation Bay, and we were leaving. It was the last day there, and we had driven down some of the back roads in that area and had gotten out, and we were walking along a creek, and we saw these 2 dead deer in the creek, and we dismissed those. But on the other side of the creek, when we looked in, we could see all these trees, and they were all in a row, had been broken in the same direction. Well, now, it is southeast Oklahoma. That could be due to storms. But the bigger, larger trees around it, they weren't broken. It was just these smaller trees. And so we were interested. And so we crossed the creek and went up into those woods, and we followed these broken trees. And we kept following them in the direction that they were pointing. And we just kept on, and we'd go off, and we wouldn't see any breaks. And then we'd see some more broken trees, and they'd all be pointed in the same direction. And I've got videos of this and pictures too. And we came up on this one area, and it was a huge area. It's trees that formed a circle. They're planted kind of look like in a circle. Well, this huge circle, when you stood in the middle of it, all of the trees were broken off at the same heights pretty much, and pointing in the same direction. So we went off that direction, going towards it. And everywhere we went, we see something like this asterisk. That's when I took this picture. And then we'd go further, and we would see arches just weaved, and you had to have hands to weave some of this stuff, because they'd be trees that had been pulled over, and then another one pulled over and weaved through it. Now, wind can do amazing things, I know.
Yeah, but not that.
When you're in the middle of all these other big old trees, it was fascinating. So we just kept following it. And then that's what led us to those 2 big trees that were uprooted that you just showed the picture of. And I mean, it was like their little playground.
Yeah.
But this is down from Tribulation Bay.
Some of the stuff that they will potentially can do with these trees is really intricate stuff. It's beautiful. Some of it. I mean, like you said, the arches where they're woven underneath and around. And I just a couple weeks ago when we were out, we saw there was I showed a picture of it. There was like 6 different arches in the same little area. I mean, it was only about a 6-foot area across, right? And there were all these arches under, over, beneath, and then there were sticks that were like this. It was shaped like a Y or a V, and those sticks were placed on them, like perfectly balanced, right, sitting on top.
Wow.
It was really neat, to find. And so I get excited about that stuff when I see it. Or even the rocks. The rock stuff is pretty neat. I found a rock on the side of the trail that we were driving down out in the state forest. There was a tree that was down, and again, no rocks around. There's no rocks anywhere here. And there's this perfect rock, and it's just sitting, balancing perfectly on the end of this tree that's down. And it just, to me, it was so out of place. I'm like, this didn't land here. You know what I mean? Like, rock didn't fall out of the sky and land on this tree that's 8 inches off the ground. So how did it get here? But neat stuff. Let me see what else we got here, because that's the bottom of the big tree. That's kind of blurry.
It's just jammed down in the ground.
Yeah. That takes some strength to do.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now let me get to Miss Barbara's stuff. Let's see.
Go get my charger real quick.
I gotta jump off here and go to this. Let's see. Okay. We will start. Nope, not that one. All right. I don't think I'm sharing anything yet, am I?
No.
No, I'm not. Damn, I'm not good at this. I'm so sorry. All right. Share that. Okay, here we go. Now we're in there.
Okay, this is if you remember earlier I told you I started playing with the sticks in my pasture.
Yep.
Well, eventually this picnic table was in my backyard. As a matter of fact, in the corner you can see my car parked right there. But I would take and put the sticks on the table all straight like this. I would just leave them straight in a line. I didn't put in any kind of symbols or anything. Now, the other picture I showed you, that would be what they do with them.
So neat. It makes you wonder what it means.
I don't know. I think this is just me personally, but I think like the A shape, the V shape, whatever you want to call it, is like a being.
Yeah, I mean, I've had people say all kinds of things. I've had some people say that they put certain sticks in together, and that means that there's that many people in that clan. You know, who knows? I mean, there could be any number of things.
Well, I say that because one time you can see the V shape on there.
Yeah.
One time I had them make the V shape and then put one inside of the V shape. And that happened when my grandson was visiting me. So I don't know if it was making it be like that was my baby. No, it's just a thought that went through my head.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I had never had that happen until he came to visit, and then the A's showed up inside of each other.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that was my thought process on that.
Well, I think it's a good thought. I mean, it's definitely makes sense why you would think that. Let's see, what's the next one?
That's just another design. Like, I don't know.
It's just so neat, man. I you know, like, I wish there was a way to know what they were thinking and feeling when they came into the yard and they saw that you laid out this whole thing for them. Like, I wonder if they get excited, and like I would if I, like, when I walk out the next day and see that they did something with it. You know, I wonder if they get excited knowing that you left something out for them.
I think it's exciting for both of us because after I found the picture turned upside down in my yard that time, it was like they were telling me, okay, we know, we're out here.
Yeah.
You know, we were aware of each other. So we just started playing stick games together. And, you know, all these years there, I never saw one. They were probably just feet from me.
Probably.
But I never got to see one of them.
Which makes me go back to, like, what we were talking about earlier about how, you know, I just don't believe that they can be flesh and blood, because when you think about the fact that you had them in your yard doing these things, you never saw one ever.
Because I would be in the bed asleep, I was bothering them. I wasn't in so much investigating the whole time. It just got to be something I found out I could do, and
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I understand. Yeah, you don't want to intrude either, and then maybe stop the activity or make them scared or whatever. I totally get it.
yeah.
But it's just weird. I mean, it's because you're not the only person who's had this activity either, right? So, you know, people like Snow White Bigfoot who've had activity going on forever. That's, to me, like, they're going in her garage.
Well, I had my back door pushed in once. Yeah.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
And the TVs.
Oh, yeah. One time my son had a bad habit of taking the screen off his window. And one night, about I'd say 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, there's just terrible crash come out of his bedroom, and I just kind of rolled over and said, "Go back to sleep." On the next morning, he said, "Mama, that wasn't me making all that noise." He said, "Something reached through my window and pushed the TVs in the floor."
What?
Yeah.
How far into the room was the TV from the window?
Oh, it was sitting right in front of the window on a table.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right. Well,
It had like
didn't-
2 of them there.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
Man,
Barbara
thank you.
would sing karaoke to him.
Oh, I did.
Really?
Did. They got to where they come up every night. I'd have a karaoke show. My husband would be out in the oil fields, and I'd be by myself, so I'd just sing to them.
Oh, that's so neat. I love that those ideas that people bring to try doing different stuff to try to get their attention and bring them closer. I think music is such a universal thing. I don't care who you are, especially if they have any part human in them. If you show me a single human on this planet that doesn't like music, I don't know anybody who doesn't. So I would imagine that to them it would probably be really neat too.
And you were talking a while ago about how they would weave things so intricately. I sent you some pictures of like a pink red looking flower hanging off a gate.
Oh yeah, hold on. Let me get those up.
I'll tell you the story behind that.
Let's see. Let me get out of here and yeah, these. Okay. So I wish I was faster at this.
Yes,
I apologize.
You're faster than I would be, so
I would never get it figured out. I'd be trying to hold my phone up here, so see.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, this flower, that is the gate that goes inside I had a big metal barn, and at the back of it, you can't hardly see it, but there's like a spray that came off of a grave, a funeral, and it had these red poinsettias on it, and that one, this sprig, I guess I'll call it, it's probably about 18 inches long, was taken off the back wall, and it was put on this gate, and it was something like I had never seen in my life, the way it was woven and put together and put on there. And I took it off, and I could never get it to go back on there the same way.
Amazing.
But I used to hang ribbons on the gate, so I guess they took the flower and they fixed the flower on the gate for me. And you can see my floor. That's where I used to find footsteps in there. It's just a powdery, dirty, rocky barn floor.
Isn't it like when you see things like this, right? When you come out of your house and you see that they've done something like this, does it give you some sort of emotional does it make you emotional at all to be like, oh my gosh, like these things have feelings, right? They must, if they're gifting me things. I mean, this is not just a random, act. This is
just believe that they were doing it with me.
Yeah.
Like, wow, why did they pick me to interact with it? I was thrilled about that. I mean, it was spooky to me, like I said earlier, but it was thrilling. I couldn't wait to get back home to see what else they had done.
Right, yeah. And I tell people this, and I think it's, when you really think about it, the physical prowess of these beings, if they wanted to, anybody who walked in the woods, they could take them and you'd be gone in a second. They wouldn't take them any effort whatsoever to kill any one of us at any time, but they don't. Even when they get angry, it's usually a show and a display, and people get the hell out of there, and it's over. I guess you probably wouldn't know if somebody was taken because they're not there to tell you they were taken. Yeah. But I think, but so many people have come in contact with them, and nothing has ever happened. I don't believe that they're aggressive or violent by nature at all. I just don't. It's really, especially the fact that they want to remain hidden for the most part, and stay away from people. And even when they interact, they do it very, very sneaky. They're like forest ninjas.
Kyle, I think as far as, you were saying that they're not aggressive.
Yeah.
I think for the most part, they're probably a lot like us as humans. You have your good and your bad and your mean and your the ones, I'm sure same way we've got killers, I'm sure they've got killers.
Yeah,
And
true.
so
Yeah,
I think personality wise, and emotions and stuff like that, I think they're probably kind of like humans in that aspect. Because I mean, you do hear stories about ones that are aggressive and ones that just terrify people, and then you do hear about people disappearing. Of course, we don't know if that's Bigfoot or not, but as far as the aggression and stuff, sometimes I think they get aggressive trying to scare us off. Get out of there, leave them alone. You're in my woods.
yeah.
But I don't know if they would hurt us. I think they, of course, have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I think that they might have certain ones that are mean. But for the most part, they seem to be docile and just want to be left alone. I think they're curious for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think the young ones are a little. They're like teenagers, like a regular teenager. They get into mischief and they got to impress their friends or their brother or their sister, or they get bored and they start, smacking people's houses in the middle of the night, knowing that it's going to mess with them. Like it's so neat. It's some of it. I really believe that they have a sense of humor.
Yeah.
It's with what they do. I just feel like they must be sitting back laughing in their little.
Oh. I imagine they've laughed at us a few times. Yeah, that's one of the headless rabbits that I've been left. I've gotten 3 of them over the period of time there. It's like they plucked the head and the front legs off.
So weird.
I'll never find out. I just find the torso.
Yeah, I don't know any animals out there that pluck the head and front legs off of rabbits and then don't eat them.
No. That tree twist was right there by my house. You can see my house through those woods, but that's a really cool twist.
Yeah, that's a heck of a twist. What do you guys do? Do you guys think those twists? I've kind of tried to do research on what else could do that, but I can't find anything that could potentially take a tree, especially a live one, and turn it 180 degrees like that without
That's
hands.
a lot of strength. The story about this is the little star in the middle. That little star, I started putting it out there, and it would get where it would disappear for a couple of days and come back. Then it would get where it would disappear for a week and come back. 2 weeks and come back. One time it was gone about 6 months, but it came back.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
6 months.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I wonder what they do with it.
I don't know, but they knew exactly where it came from, and it would always come back.
Incredible. This is why it's so fascinating, because of things like that.
Yes.
What do they do? 6 months, they take this thing away, and it's this little tiny star. Like, what do they do with it? And then they know where it is and know where to bring it back to.
Yeah, and it won't be all nasty and crappy.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. All right, let me see. I got to get to your other pictures here. What are these? Those are the sticks. I think we only have one more set of pics. Oh yeah, the footprints. The footprints.
Yeah.
That's what they are. Okay. All right, here we go. Oh, look at that little print.
Okay. Now, like I say, I found this stuff before I knew anything about casting but I did know that it was 6 inches long.
Oh, it's a little guy.
Yeah. And it's in that floor of that barn you saw a picture of a while ago. And it's just one.
So neat.
You see the little scrunched up with the toes. I wish,
Yep.
at least I got a picture of it. Didn't cast it, but I got a picture of it.
It's so neat. I said, I forget who I was talking to earlier, and I said to one of you that I get more excited about like seeing the baby prints.
Yes.
Just because I don't know, like it's really cool, obviously, to find a giant print that's 17 inches long or 18 inches long, but finding a little baby footprint, and it's not a baby, it's
Right.
one of these creatures. To me, that's just so neat, knowing that there's
Yes.
these little tiny baby foots running around out there too.
And this one was even smaller than the other one. And I actually found this footprint in March. And then the other footprint you showed, I like the next January.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
guy needs his nails cut.
I'm telling you. Yeah.
Probably gave mom hell when she tried.
Don't you know?
Look
Yeah,
at that little
was
tiny
foot.
print.
That's my foot in the bottom.
Look at that little tiny print, man. So cute. All right, what's
I
that?
was just, I was bouncing off the walls when I found that. That's a handprint.
Yeah, I was gonna say that looks like a big hand.
It was a big handprint in the pasture.
How big was that?
Oh, it was way bigger than my hand, probably man size, or maybe bigger than a man's hand. And see, I would find stuff like this on my little trails. I had a certain little trail I followed, and I would check that trail pretty much daily, looking for something new. They bring me bed springs. You know how mattresses used to have those big old springs in them. They'd bring them and lay them on the trail, and just stuff for me to find.
So weird. I just wonder why. What goes through their head when they figure, hey, I'm gonna bring her a bed spring.
I don't know, but they would, and I'd keep it.
So neat. Well, listen, it's. I know it's getting late. It's like 10 o'clock now. You guys have been here for 2 hours. I don't want to keep you any longer. I'd love to have you back on though, so we can talk about some of the newer stuff, because you guys have been wonderful. This was so. Some of the stuff again I've watched and I've heard before, but I just even hearing it again, it's still so exciting to hear. Like it's amazing.
It is.
We get excited talking about it.
Yeah.
I never dreamed stuff like this was going to happen to us. We were just a bunch of women that wanted to go in the woods and find Bigfoot. And
well, lucky you.
Changed.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
And some people were talking about in the comments, they hope that you're protected out there in case you come across a mean one, but probably even more so for the two-legged crazies and the other animals are the ones you probably have to worry about more than anything.
Really?
Right. Yeah, we don't carry because of Bigfoot. I don't think the guns that we have would ever even stop one.
Yeah.
But we carry because of the human aspect and then other animals.
Yeah. Well, I'm so happy you guys finally came on. I really am. This was so exciting for me, and I can't tell you how much of a fan. I'm just a fan. Like I am. I love this subject, and so I say this to people before this show. Like this is just kind of a conduit for me to help spread some of this knowledge to others, but it's also so I can have fun and talk to people that I look up to and love, and so this has been so fun for me. The fan in me of this subject is just thrilled, and So thank you. I'd love to have you on again. I'm sure, we'll keep in contact. If you find any cool evidence, send some pictures my way or some audio. I'd love to hear it and see it.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you guys so much. I will be back on, what's today? Sunday, the 27th. I'll be back on the 30th with Alexander Petikoff at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So please make sure you tune into that, because we're going to talk about the new documentary that they just released, which was awesome. If you didn't watch it, I suggest you watch it. The Alaskan Coastal Sasquatch. They did such a good job at that. So take a peek at that. It's on YouTube right now. And hope everybody has a wonderful night. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Until the next one, I love you all. Have a wonderful night.
Good night.
Night, y'all.